Help us to be in love with your word. You know what the Bible says? You might have this memorized. It says in John 14:21, well, that one is so new it's not even open. John 14:21 says, "He that has my word and keeps it is the one that loves me." You know, a lot of people say, I want to love the Lord, or I love the Lord, and the Lord said, it's very simple to know if you love me. If you have my word, so we have the word, and keep it. And what's interesting, the word keep doesn't mean I just keep this around. You know, my Bible, actually it's the same word, keep, that was used for guarding when Peter was in jail and when Jesus was put in the tomb. At those two times, you know, in Acts 12 and in John 20, when that word is used, keep, they had guards that protected that no one would let Peter out of jail or Jesus steal his body. And what it means is that you don't just keep it like keep it, but you keep it like keep it. Kind of like if you have a cell phone that you don't want to lose, you know, you're always holding on to it, making sure you have it. If you have a wallet with money in it and you haven't spent all your pesos on cookies, then you guard your wallet. The Lord says, he that has my word and guards it, keeps it, treasures it, holds on tight, that is who loves me. Wow. So that was a good prayer, Pauline. You were praying John 14:21's truth, and that's a blessing. Okay, this morning, loneliness. We're looking at the life of David through the book of 1 Samuel. And David starts showing us loneliness. Now, I don't know that much about the Philippine culture, but in America, loneliness is considered the deepest social, personal pain that people have. Some people have bitterness, some people have hurt, some people have anger, but all of those are just focused at one person or event. You know, they're bitter that someone hurt them, they're angry that someone took something from them, and it's kind of like, you know, my anger for that event. Loneliness is different. Loneliness covers your entire life. It's called the deepest pain that humans can feel. Loneliness causes everything to ache. Our heart, our mind, our body, our relations, our emotions, every part of us. Loneliness is the most pain. And what's interesting is the people that study culture of the world, the whole world, they say that the world is getting lonelier and lonelier. People like Manila has 20 million people or whatever are in Manila, and people are living so close. I mean, you can touch apartment on both sides of you in some of those apartment buildings, and yet people are living with millions of people around them and they're lonely. They feel all alone. In America, you can have 5,000 Facebook friends and feel totally alone because you're really not close to anybody. Some people are not even close to their family. People that are married aren't even close to who they're married to. Parents aren't even close to their children. Children aren't even close to their parents. And I don't mean close like sitting by each other. I mean, we could say Joseph is close to Pauline. All that means is he's sitting next to her, but he's not really close to her. See, we are close but separated. In America, the illustration I use is I take a vase. A vase is like my coffee cup here, only it's clear, and usually you put flowers in it. And if I took a vase and filled it with marbles, do they have marbles here, little round glass things? If I filled my vase with marbles and held up the vase, all the marbles would be touching each other in the vase. They'd all be close. If I took the vase and poured it out on Rodelio's table, those marbles would go in every direction. They're totally unconnected. That's how people are. In their apartment buildings, they're close. In the car or bus or work, they're close. At church, they're close. They sit by each other. But if you dump them out, they're not connected. See, that's what David was experiencing in Psalm 56. He, because of the unexpected changes in his life, that's what he experienced. Wait a minute. I've got to go like this because that's actually the very last slide. We're done with class. Now we're starting over. Where we're going is we're on the 8th stop of our 20 stops. We're going through 1st and 2nd Samuel, chapter by chapter by chapter, event by event by event. And we've seen Christ and Hannah and Saul and Agag, and we looked at what God wrote about David and Goliath. And then we saw that David wrote Psalms. That was where we ended yesterday. David wrote a prayer to God. That's what Psalms are, by the way. They're a song, an offering, a prayer to God. He wrote a prayer to God from every season of his life. Isn't that amazing to think about? Aren't you glad he did? 3,000 years ago, David wrote about all of his problems, and that is still blessing us today. Isn't that amazing how God uses that? Well, this morning's problem is Psalm 56. So let's open there to Psalm 56, and we're going to read the whole psalm in pieces here and there and all along. Now, if you were paying attention yesterday, by Psalm 56, remember I told you I have written 1 Samuel 21, 10 to 12. Do you see in your Bibles, those of you that have the superscript, do you see how it says, to the chief musician, the silent dove in distant lands, a miktam of David, when the Philistines captured him in Gath? That's the first verse of the Hebrew manuscript. It's in many of your Bibles, and the event is in 1 Samuel 21, which I haven't put up there yet. Well, here, it's right here, 1 Samuel 21. Now, let me show you, because if I took a picture of your map right over here of Israel, there it is. See the Dead Sea, which is right on its side, right here. This is the Dead Sea. There's the Sea of Galilee. And so right there, on this part of it, right at the top of the Dead Sea, and the left side or the west side of it, this is where these events took place. Now remember, I told you context. Number one, history. Everything happens sometime. Number two, geography. Everything happens somewhere. That's where all those events happen. At the top, number one, which you probably can't see, but it's right at the very top there on the center. The priests give David consecrated bread. He runs, number two, over there to Gath. See, that little dot right there is the city of Gath. And I told you that he went walking in with that sword on. And as he was walking through, people were looking at it, and they were saying, is that Goliath's sword? Is that Goliath's sword? Why does he have Goliath's sword? How did he get Goliath's sword? Is that David that we hear the Jews singing about, killing his tens of thousands of our people? Do you understand? The Jews, the Israelites, would sing and dance. Have you ever seen how Israelis get excited and they just jump around and clap their hands and sing at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem? That's just how Jewish people are. They're very musical, like Filipino people, and they're very folk dancey. Do you guys have folk dances, like cultural, that everybody knows? Do all of you kind of know them? That's exactly how. Now, it's not like that in America. I mean, they have square dancing, but we don't have folk dancing. But the Jewish people will just jump up and down. The funniest thing is to see a group of soldiers wearing their uniforms with gigantic guns, gigantic guns on. And all of a sudden, they all just put their arms around each other and dancing in a circle, singing these same songs from the Bible. That's, as they were jumping around in David's day, they were saying, King Saul has killed thousands. David, the young man, has killed 10,000s. David was 10 times greater than the king. And here he comes walking through Gath with Goliath's sword strapped on. We covered that, and he goes from that, escapes down on the left to Adullam. That's actually a word right there in the middle, the cave of Adullam. He goes from there, number 4, to up there in the top, and he runs over on the other side of the sea, Dead Sea, and takes his family. He thinks Saul will hunt down his parents. In Bethlehem, they lived in a little tiny town with no fortress, and he says, I don't want the king to take my parents captive or kill them. So he takes him from Bethlehem up into enemy territory. See, David feels so desperate. He goes into Philistine territory. He puts his parents into Moab territory and Edom territory. Do you know why he did that? Because he was so well as a warrior. The king of Moab and the kings of Moab and Edom thought, if we're nice to David, maybe he won't attack us, because the Philistines can't make it in front of him. He's killing tens of thousands of the biggest warriors of the day. So you see, David was very wise, taking his parents over there into enemy territory. He comes back, that's number 4. Number 5, he goes to Keilah, which is a city we'll talk about. And then number 5, he hides in the forest of Hereth. Number 6, he goes to Keilah. And then he hears from Jonathan, and all, you can see it up there. But this psalm is all over the map. And what is going on is David is lonely. Now, if you've ever been there, this is what it looks like. I mean, look at those rocks. It's desert. Do you have any desert in the Philippines? It seems to rain every night. It rains hard. We have a tin roof. Do you guys have tin roofs on yours too? Metal roofs? I love the sound of that rain hitting the roof. But I don't know how anything could get deserty. But that is what Israel looks like. Most of Israel looks just like that. Dry. Do you know what the blue is in the background? That's the Dead Sea. What you're doing right here is you're looking from this spot right there, looking across the Dead Sea at Moab. You're looking in the distance. You see the blue? The part that's not blue on the other side is Moab, where Ruth was from. That's where David took his parents. So, and this happens to be the Wadi of En-Gedi. This is the gorge of the goats, which in the Bible is called En-Gedi. And that's where David goes. Now, what David is learning, and what we're going to learn as we read and talk through all this, is that Christ is his lifelong refuge. Now, our president, Trump, yesterday was in Afghanistan, of all places. Do you guys know where Afghanistan is? You know, over by India and Pakistan. It's one of the most war-torn parts of the world in the Middle East. And our president flew he was in Florida, and no one knew, except they said for a handful of people, that he got out of his Mar-a-Lago resort where he lives in Florida, got taken to a military airport, flew halfway around the world, landed in Afghanistan, and fed turkey dinner to the American soldiers. And it wasn't just Trump, the president, it was the head of the Pentagon, our highest military officer, plus all the other most important military people in America all went together, landed, did that, and they flew back, and now they're back in Florida. I don't know how they did that. But you know what they said? When the president does that, what flies with him is a complete refuge. His jet, surrounded by fighter jets. They have missiles on them and guns and everything. Another jet's behind him that has in it armored, tank-like objects that he gets into and drives around in with soldiers with all their big weapons. And he served turkey dinner, and then he got back in his tank, and they drove back to the airplane, and circling overhead, there were helicopters and jets protecting him. And when he got back on the airplane, the helicopters got into the plane behind him, and all the jets were around him, and he flew back to Florida. They're trying to reproduce what all of us have. Jesus is surrounding you and me every day. Jesus is your refuge. He follows you, just like those soldiers guard our president. I think they guard your president too, don't they? Duarte? I bet he has a bunch of people that have either guns here or guns here. They're all around him. And you probably don't even see most of them because, they're not supposed to be seen, so they can guard him. That's what Jesus is, a refuge. In fact, the word refuge is in Hebrew, met suda. Now, have any of you ever heard of the mountain in Israel that became King Herod's fortress? It's called Masada in English. That's just English for the Hebrew word refuge, Metsuda. And basically, Masada is a mountain that goes straight up like this. It's flat and goes back. And it's so precipitous. It's right here by the Dead Sea. This is the Dead Sea. But it's so steep that even the Roman legions couldn't conquer that thing for about a year and a half. Thousands of soldiers tried to get the Jewish people that were on top here, 900 of them, and thousands of soldiers couldn't make it to the top because it was so high, all you had to do is stand and throw a rock, and you could knock off you know how many rocks there are in Israel, and they were just fighting them off every day, all day long, never ran out of rocks, and all the Roman legions, no matter what they did. And what the Roman legions did is they took Jewish men, women, and children and built a ramp all the way up the side, and the Jews would not throw rocks at other Jews, women and children and relatives and all. And so it took a year or two at Masada, and they built this ramp, and finally they broke in and took Masada. But that, to Israel, is the ultimate refuge, Masada, Metsuda, which is exactly what David calls the Lord. David said, "The Lord is my refuge." And that's the one that's your refuge. And do you know what the most often use of it will be? Loneliness. Loneliness is the most frequent emotion, especially for young people. Do any of you know any friends, or do Filipinos young people commit suicide, or is that, okay, so they do it here. In Japan, suicide is so common that they have police that walk through the parks and stop people from hanging themselves in the trees. That's how common suicide is in Japan. They have suicide police that keep young people from tying ropes and choking themselves in trees. Full time. That's all the police do. They walk around and look at the trees in the parks and say, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." So you know what the young people do in Japan? They're very wealthy in Japan. A lot of them have Lexus cars. You ever heard of a Lexus? That's the highest end, Lexus. In America, a Lexus can cost $100,000 for one little car. And the Japanese, they're so well made that the Lexus, when they shut the windows, no air can come into the car, only through its filtration system. In other words, they're airtight. You could almost drive it into water and water wouldn't come into it. It's that well made. Do you know what the young people do? 4 of them will say, let's have a hibachi party. Hibachi is a little grill with charcoal where you cook meat on it. You guys have those, They call them a hibachi there. Inside their car, their $100,000 Lexus, they put a grill with charcoal. They light it. They cook a meal with the windows up. With the windows up. The fire consumes all the oxygen in the car. While they're cooking, they're eating, all of them get sleepy at the same time. That's what happens when your oxygen goes away, your body starts feeling sleepy because it's shutting down. And all over Japan, police will come to a place and there is a brand new $100,000 Lexus. And they'll look through the window and there are 4 young people. It looks like they're sleeping. They've committed suicide together. They call that hibachi parties. And they die for one reason. They're lonely. Their parents work 60, 70 hours a week. Their grandparents work their whole life. Their parents are wealthy. Grandparents are wealthy. And no one is close. And they say, what is the reason to even live? There's no reason. And that's why, are any of those Word of Life Japan? Oh, we're already in Japan, so it's not up there. That's right. Okay. But that's why Word of Life is in Japan. And in my class in Korea, I met a young man. And like just everyone, hey, what are you going to do? And tell me about your life. And I met him, and I said, tell me about, when you got saved. And as soon as I started talking to him, he went like this. Do you know what that means in America? When you start talking to me and I go like this, what am I looking at? Yeah, the time. You know what that usually means in America? I don't have time to talk to you. Stop talking to me. I'm busy. I thought, what a disrespectful boy that I didn't get more than 3 words out, when did you get saved? And he starts looking at his watch. And after about a minute, he looked up and he said, I was Christian 2 months, 1 week, 2 days ago. He was calculating from his watch calendar how long he's been a Christian. And I said, wow, no one's ever done that before to me. And he says, oh, I'm so excited to be a Christian. He said, I was going to commit suicide, like all the other young people in Japan. He says, and I had no hope, and my grandmother says, you should go, there's a new coffee shop where they're teaching English. Why don't you go learn English? It was a Word of Life coffee shop teaching English. And he goes to this coffee shop, and they lead him 2 months, weeks, and 3 days ago. He changed so quickly, his grandmother said, what happened to you, David? What happened to you? And he was afraid to tell her, she's Buddhist. She's a Shinto Buddhist. That means she worships dead people. That's demonism. His grandmother worships dead people. She goes to shrines where ashes of dead people are and bows down to them, and it's Shinto Buddhism. And so he, was a brand new Christian, and he thought, man, she'll not let me be around the Christians. And she said, what happened to you? He said, they shared something with me at the coffee shop. She said, do they have anything else to share? I'll pay for it. She said, I like what they're doing to you. He says, yeah, they have a Bible, well, he didn't call it Bible school. He says, they have an advanced school. She said, I'll pay for any advanced school in this, what you're getting. She sent him to the Bible Institute in Korea, and now she sent him to the Bible Institute in New York. And now she's paying for him to go to a Christian university in America. Why? Because loneliness is destroying people. Okay, let's look at what God says about it. First of all, look at the geography. Remember I showed you this about how David, when he runs from King Saul, he's going through this amazing geography. Before he writes Psalm 56, this is everything that happens to him that's terrible. He has the intense loneliness of being a young person. And then his family, remember, his father-in-law wants to kill him and his wife. Then he gets fired by Saul, number 3. He loses his job, and he's separated from his family and his wife. So he's already going through that. Then he moves to a new location. He goes to Philistine territory, very foreign to him. Then he runs from there into that cave we looked at yesterday. Remember 1 Samuel 22, he's in the cave with, one of you read it up here, how many? 400? I remember I said, how many people are with him? 400 troublemakers are in the cave. And then he's unemployed, he has no job, he's living in a cave, he's kind of like homeless, and he's not around his family. And then, we haven't even gotten to this in 1 Samuel, but he goes to that city I shared with you called Keilah, that's right over here on the edge of the sea, and rescues them from marauding terrorists that were coming after him. And he thought it would be safe to move into Keilah, and the people of that town send a messenger to King Saul and said, if you're looking for David, you can find him here. So he gets betrayed by his friends. Then he starts working for protecting Nabal, the rich man. There was a man who had a large herd of, or flock of sheep in this area here. So David protects his sheep from lions and wolves and thieves. And when it comes time for payday, Nabal says, I'm not paying you. So David felt wronged in a business deal, number 8. And then he's lonely because, again, he's away from his family. And then he feels like a failure. That's Psalm 13. And then, I mean, we could just go through this all the way through. David is lonely when he gets old, because when you're the king, you're far away. So we have this geography that makes him distant from everybody. I mean, he is in the desert, and the mountains are between him and his family. But now, this is where we left off yesterday in Psalm 52. David is unemployed in 1 Samuel 21, 1-9. And then, in that context, and I'll read to you 1 Samuel 21, because you're going to look at Psalm 56. I'll do the 1 Samuel parts for you. 1 Samuel 21, 1-9. And David came to Nob, and he went to see Ahimelech, and Ahimelech gave him the sword, and that launches the horrible events of David feeling so bad, having that sword, the priests get killed. He runs away in verse 11, and it says, and the servants of Achish said, is not this David the king of the land? And he goes through what we looked at yesterday of spitting up on his beard, remember, having a breakdown, clawing at the doorposts, acting crazy. And from that come these 3 psalms. Now, we're only going to go through one, but 3 psalms, 3 songs to God come out of this time in his life. Okay, first of all, what are the details? In verse 1 of chapter 22, David departed and went into the cave. David is all alone. There's no army with him yet. They don't start joining him, according to 1 Samuel 22, right away. But then they start collecting all these people. David has no family, no friends. He has nothing. He was desperate. And he's all alone. Okay, number 1, Psalm 56. And I'm going to turn there with you because we're going to read through this. Psalm 56 is how to make godly choices when you're all alone. Now I want you to think about this, because all of us are going to be alone sooner or later. In America, for most people, aloneness comes when they go to college. They leave home, They move into a dorm with a bunch of other students, and it's like nobody's watching them, and they're all alone. And for most Christians in America, their college years are the worst years. Many of them get into alcohol, drinking. Many of them get into immorality, sexual involvement. Many of them, when the professors are teaching, start doubting Christianity. In fact, most parents are afraid of their kids in college years. They're afraid they're going to lose them. They're not even going to become Christians anymore, if you could lose your salvation. David, on the other hand, makes godly choices when he's alone. And the first one is in the first 3 verses. And does anybody remember who the last reader was yesterday? Ronell, it was you. So is it you, Ike? You're next. Are we going that way? We're going. It's going that way. You guys read. It's going that way. So it's Patricia, or it's going that way. Gold. See, whenever I can't figure out, Gold's my man. Gold, can you read one of 56? Lean, you get 2. You guys should get awards for this. You've read more than anybody else, and you get 3. Okay, 56:1, Gold. All 3 verses are addressed to whom? See the name up there? Who did he seek? God. Look at verse 1. Be merciful to me, O God. When David was all alone, the first thing he did is he sought God. Now watch. You can learn this even without a word. If I was lonely, when I'm lonely, if you see a lonely person, a lot of times what you see is they're really not looking at anything or anyone. They're just kind of looking off in the distance or looking down or sitting there just kind of looking off like at nothing. They're just kind of dejected is the English word. You don't look at anything, you don't do anything, you just sit there. What does David do? He looks up. You know, it's interesting. Bonnie and I have 8 children. I learned something from our children. When everything's going great, they're skipping and hopping when they were little. They would be throwing stones, they'd be, picking up things, they'd be looking at the birds and everything. But as soon as there was a loud noise like thunder or a crash of a car or a siren, they immediately looked for us. And, of course, they're little, they'd look up at us. And if it was really a scary sound, they would go like this and ask us to hold them. Now, the first time that ever happened to me, Bonnie and I, when we first got married, lived in an apartment that was only this big, from that wall to here, from here to there. Over here was our bedroom, and our bedroom was only as big as the mattress of our bed. So you put the mattress in the door, and it came down, and it went from wall to wall. They had built it the size of a normal mattress. No dresser, no closet. A bed right here. And when I was laying in the bed, I could change the diaper of our first little baby, laying in bed, and go like this, and put it in the sink in the bathroom. Because right there was the bathroom. It was kind of like one little room. So bed, bathroom, and then over here, the kitchen was just kind of like a little sink and whatever. And then was the front door and the entry room. So here we were in this little tiny thing. And we had this baby, little Johnny. Well, he couldn't be in bed with us. There wasn't enough room even for us. And he couldn't be in the bathroom. It was too small. So the only place for him was right out here in this area before the door. And so I didn't want to wake up Bonnie. I would get up at 5 o'clock. I got up 4 o'clock this morning in the dark, and I would get up, and we had purchased for him this little, it was called a bassinet. It was a little box about this high around with little legs in America. Bassinet holds the baby up, and they sleep in there. And it was over there. Here's our room. It was over here. And in the dark, I came out of this little bathroom, walking through the other little space, trying to go out the door, because I was a pastor and I had Bible studies early with men at 5:30 in the morning. And when I walked by the bassinet, I didn't, in the dark, notice that the little legs of it, like the legs of your tables here, they're under the table. But the legs of the bassinet were wider than the object, the bed. So they were sticking out a little bit. So I was walking by real cautiously, and my foot went against the bassinet where Johnny was, our baby. He was only like 5 or 6 months old. Do you know what happens when a baby gets startled? Have any of you had little brothers or sisters? There is a medically labeled response, and I don't know the exact medical name for it, but there is this wiring in the brain that little Johnny was laying on his back, sound asleep. I went like this, and his little arms went. They come up just like that. His little eyes went just like this. And his little mouth went. And so he went from sound asleep. I'm walking by, bump. And it was so neat. He was looking right at me. And you know what it was like? He was saying, "Help me." I felt so good as a dad. I thought, he needs me. He wants me. He wants me to help him. And I just stood there, and of course, what happens right after that instant? The loud cry started. And so I went right out the door with my Bible and shut it and let Bonnie wake up and take care of him and comfort him. Now I have to tell you a secret. That made me feel so good that my son needed me and reached, his eyes, he was looking right into my eyes. His eyes were as big as they could get, and he put his arms out to me like this. That in the days ahead, not every day, but many days, I would get all ready. I'd get my Bible, ready for my Bible study. I'd walk up to the bassinet, and I'd go. And I'd look down at him and say, "I love you too," and I'd go to work. Oh, isn't that mean? Make Bonnie wake up every morning. Finally, she said to me, "Honey, why is it about every other day John starts screaming and crying?" I said, "He must miss me or something. He loves me." But finally, I stopped doing that. What did David do when he got kicked by life, when he was all alone? To God. Now let me ask you, do you do that? Is that the first place you reach out? Or do you reach out here and start texting friends? Or do you reach out here and start calling home? Nothing wrong with texting friends and calling home. After this, when you feel alone, when you feel afraid, when you feel far from God, when you feel unsettled, that's when we seek God. That's what he wants. Not only seek him, verse 4. Now we're on Theodi and Rodelio. You're going to get, so Theodi, you get 4. Rodelio, you get 10 and 11. My front row scholars. Okay? 4, Theodi.
Verse 4. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me.
In God will I praise his word, in the Lord will I praise his word. In God have I put my trust, I will not be afraid what man can do unto me.
Good reading, wonderful reading. Do you see what he did? He cried out to the Lord. Did you know, hey, wait a minute, think about this. David thought those thoughts. But do you know how we know about them? He said them. Did you know one of the things people don't realize is It's not enough to think the right things. You're supposed to say them. How does a person get saved? By just thinking about God? No. What does the Bible say? With your mouth you confess unto salvation. That's Romans 10, 9 and 10. For with the heart you believe, but with the mouth you confess. Now, I was a pastor. I still am, but I've already been a pastor for 40 years. One problem that happens all the time in the church is couples having trouble in their marriages. Christians. You guys, most of you, let's see, Boy is married, Dave and Grace are married. Are any of the rest of you married? Oh, Ronell is married to someone else. Okay. The rest of you, you're looking on marriage as, whoa, can't wait, it's going to be wonderful. Guess what? Even Christians struggle. And I would have these women that would tow their husband in. It means you pull them. And into my office would come this woman, you could tell she was unhappy, towing her husband. And they'd sit down, and the husband would be like this. And the wife would look at me and say, he doesn't love me anymore. And I'd say, well, wait. Let's start over again. I said, hello, what are your names? Hello, Pauline. Let's get started civilly. I mean, it started in a bang, towing him in and pushing him in the chair. I mean, nobody likes that. Do you want to be towed in and thrown in the pastor's office? But this woman, this wife, is so troubled, she just has to do something. So I sit there and I say, okay, what's the problem? He doesn't love me anymore. I do too, he'll say. She'll say, he doesn't love me anymore. I said, well, let's just start by this. I look at the man and I say, tell her that you love her. Do you know what they always said for 40 years? She knows that I love her. I said, well, say it. She knows that I love her. I said, just say it. The men will persist with. Did you know this, when you do this, means that you're not happy and you're against what's going on? That's a mannerism we do that we say, I don't agree with you. And so they're all, she knows it. I said, look, and then this is really fun. Now, if I don't want to embarrass you guys, but I usually bring up a young lady and a young man, and I have them face each other and hold hands like this, but that's way too much to do in this class. Imagine I've got one of you young ladies, one of you young men, and Theody, you'll be my helper here. Oh, you're so sweet. And I have the man hold her hands and look into her eyes, and I say, repeat after me. And they'll go, what will they always say? She knows. They won't even look at the wife. She knows. I said, no, say it. And finally they'll go, I love you. That does something. As soon as he says it out loud, he has said, even though it doesn't, did it sound like love? Did that sound like love? I love you. That sounds like duty. But what happens is it breaks the log jam, it unlocks the door. And so I'll keep talking to him and all, and I'll say, okay, let's do it again. It's not as hard. He'll turn and he'll take her hands and say, I love you. It wasn't as bad as the last time. By the end of the time, all I do is talk through what the Bible says we're supposed to do. Finally, he'll actually, all his own, put his arm around her. I even see men will move their chairs a little closer, because they're sitting in front of my desk. And the man will scooch his chair over, and he'll finally say, I realize what it is. I think it, but I don't say it. And the wife isn't content with you thinking. She wants to hear you say it. She wants you to say out loud what you believe in your heart. That's good, because God says the same thing. He said that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God hath raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart man believes unto righteousness, but with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. That's why when you have a wedding, that's why they say their vows to each other out loud. They feel it, but everybody wants to hear it. What did David do? David cried out to the Lord and said what you just heard my wonderful readers read. Verse 4, in God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. Verse 10, in God I will praise his word. David puts his thoughts into words. Isn't that exciting? Now, do you want to know the next time you're lonely, afraid, struggling? In fact, I'll tell you, this really works. I was your age on a missions team delivering Bibles. Remember I told you that we used to smuggle Bibles into communist countries and into Arab countries, Muslim countries. And when I was your age, I would take Bibles into Northern Africa and Eastern Europe and Russia and all that. And we would work on these delivering Bibles, and it was very hard, and it was intense, and it was frightening, because if they caught us, they put us in jail, and we would be there for a long time. And I remember when we finally finished our biggest mission, we came out of the dangerous country. We were in a free country, the country of Austria, and I went with the team, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us, and 3 of them were girls, and 3 of us were boys, and we had worked together for all these weeks delivering Bibles. And when I got to this safe place, they gave us all where we were staying, and I hadn't taken a shower in 2 weeks, and so I went off down the hall. They put me in the I think it was a library, and there's a little cot, a little bed, a mobile bed they'd put in their house in the library, and they said the shower's down there. So I went to the shower. When I got back from the shower, I'm walking down the hall. I have my towel wrapped around me. I walk to the library. There is one of the Christian girls from my missions team. She's sitting on the cot, and she has my shirt on and nothing else. She's sitting there on my bed. And I'm 19 years old. And I glanced. I'd never seen that much of any girl in my life. You know what she said? I'm staying with you tonight. And I'll never forget. I walked up to the door, and the only thing she had done that she didn't realize is she left my backpack on that cot. And I, holding my towel, I went in, and I got my backpack, and I pulled it like that, and I went out, and I said, you know what I said? Out loud, I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. That's Psalm 101. We already covered it with you. I really believed that. I believed it was wicked for her to wear my shirt, take her clothes off, sit on my bed, and that was like Potiphar's wife. That was exactly. You know what she did? She walked up like this to the door and slammed it shut as hard as she could. I never saw her again, but a year later I got a letter in my college, and she said, I did that with every boy all summer long on the missions teams, and you were the only one that didn't stay all night with me. I thought, shame on them. But you know what I did? I cried out to him. Try it. When you're afraid, when you're tempted, when you're lonely, say, Lord, to you I cry out, just like David. Have a good break. See you in 10 minutes.